I seem to have traveled to a parallel world. Here, I am the tragic heroine of a cruel romance novel. At this moment, I've lost my child and my kidney, and the legendary domineering CEO is looking down at me from above. Frank, a person who originally didn't exist in my world, he entered with his assistant while I was lying in bed sorting through my memories. In this world, apart from having a completely opposite personality to mine, the original body was identical to me in every way, from name and appearance to educational background. Therefore, I have reason to suspect that I've arrived in a parallel world. It's just that this parallel world seems to be a domineering CEO novel full of tragic romance. According to the nurse, I donated a kidney while 5 months pregnant. The recipient was the CEO's white moonlight, my adopted sister Bella. The baby was, of course, aborted. This makes no sense. But in the world of domineering CEO novels, the male lead is the law. I heard you woke up, so I came to see you. Frank stared down at me. A flicker of emotion passed through his dark eyes before they turned cold again. I understand. This scumbag is the legendary type who keeps one eye on the pot and the other on the pan, because the white moonlight tormented the original Susan both physically and emotionally, yet inexplicably felt heartache when seeing her truly in mortal danger. Absolutely disgusting. In my youth, I was also obsessed with this kind of novel. Only after growing up did I realize that in this kind of novel, from the male lead to the female supporting characters, everyone seems to have some serious issues. Now that I've lost a kidney, if I go through another round of tragic romance, I'll probably either fake my death or flee the country, but I can't be bothered with all that drama. I plan to take the shortcut. Sorry, my memory seems to be a bit faulty. May I ask who you are? After speaking, I feigned helplessness and lowered my eyes. Faking death could certainly make Frank quickly realize his love for Susan, but who knows how many more years that would take to sort out. I refuse to go through that. I want to live in front of him, to live until I forget his very existence. That way, every time he sees me, he'll be reminded of Susan's goodness. Isn't the most tormenting thing in this world the thought of, I could have, as the words fell. Frank's breath hitched, and his brows furrowed tightly. Susan, what trick are you trying to pull now? Do you think pretending to have amnesia will get you out of this divorce? With that, he stepped forward and gripped my chin. Tears welled up in my eyes as I reached out to press the call button. Damn bastard. Every movement sends pain shooting through my entire body. I will have my revenge for the kidney they took from me, of course. I know the hospital staff are somewhat afraid of Frank's influence. I'm doing this just to make a statement. When the doctor arrived, Frank acted as if he was about to expose my lies and had them examine me, but the human brain is the most mysterious. I insist it's amnesia. The doctor could only say it might be due to brief oxygen deprivation during the transplant surgery, which indeed caused memory loss. Is there any hope of recovery? Frank lit a cigarette anxiously as he spoke. The doctor choked on the smoke but dared not voice his anger. Sir, could you please not smoke in my hospital room? At this moment, I looked at him as if he were a complete stranger, even with a hint of disdain in my eyes. Frank stared at me, stubbed out his cigarette, and then said to his assistant, Go next door and call Mrs. Smith over. The Mrs. Smith he mentioned was Susan's mother. It's almost laughable. While her own daughter had a kidney removed, she was next door keeping her adopted daughter company. Even though I had mentally prepared myself, I still froze the moment I saw Mrs. Smith's face. Just as I thought, it was the exact same face as my mother's. Mom, I couldn't help but let out a cry. If possible, I want to return to my world immediately. Mrs. Smith was visibly startled by my slightly aggrieved voice, as if she was quite unaccustomed to it. It suddenly dawned on me that she wasn't my mother, in this world. Susan seems to be my polar opposite. I have a strong personality and never let any slight go unpunished. She, on the other hand, is weak-willed and overly submissive. I come from a wealthy family, the only child doted on by my parents. She was lost since childhood, grew up relying on the kindness of strangers, while her parents adopted a replacement. After finally returning home, she fell in love with Frank, her arranged marriage partner. Yet he had grown up with her adopted sister as childhood sweethearts, and harbored deep hatred for her. After Mrs. Smith sat down, she briefly explained the situation to me, offered a few hollow words of comfort, and then got straight to the point. Susan, I hope you don't hold a grudge against Bella. If she could help it, She wouldn't want to be sick either. My heart sank. What kind of life had the original Susan been living? Though anyone would naturally favor the daughter they raised for 20 years over the biological daughter they only acknowledged 2 years ago, does that mean Susan and her child's lives are worthless? My expression turned cold. Besides, you stole Bella's husband, so it's even. Even. If you hadn't lost Susan, there wouldn't have been a Bella in the first place. 2 lives for one worthless man. How is that even remotely even? A surge of hatred, not my own, welled up inside me. It seems I've figured out how to return to my world. After she finished speaking, I didn't respond but instead turned to look out the window. Mrs. Smith, do you remember how you felt when you were 5 months pregnant? You must remember. After all, mothers always recall such details with particular clarity. Watching him grow day by day in your womb, imagining him thriving under a mother's love. Filled with anticipation for his arrival, what memory may forget, the body and heart never will. Don't you agree? I turned my head abruptly and locked eyes with her. Mrs. Smith paled, as if remembering something, and no longer dared to stay. She hastily made an excuse and left the ward. I curled my lips into a smile. Excessive guilt can make people want to escape. I don't think I'll be seeing Mrs. Smith again anytime soon. That's for the best. Seeing her wearing my mother's face and spouting nonsense to me makes me feel utterly suffocated, ever since I announced my memory loss. Frank has stopped mentioning divorce altogether. He comes to sit in my hospital room for a while every day. I ignored him, and he just stared at me with a heavy gaze. That day, he came in carrying a fruit basket. Bella nodded and greeted him. Mr. Frank, I knew exactly how to make him suffer the most. I am your husband, Frank emphasized coldly. I pretended to be taken aback and said, I remember you mentioning divorce that day. Presumably, we didn't have much affection before. In that case, it's better to get used to being strangers sooner rather than later. Susan, his face turned livid as he called my name. Mr. Frank, I don't know how my mother convinced you to abort your own child to save my sister, no matter what happened in the past. I can't accept it now. I pretended not to know about his affair with Bella. I thought even someone as shameless as Frank wouldn't dare claim I had volunteered for this. In my memory, the original Susan was utterly pathetic. Loving such scum, willingly being a blood bag, and stubbornly refusing to divorce. In the end, when Bella was critically ill, she was forcibly taken to the operating room by Frank. What's the use of regret only after the child died? Now, Frank is somewhat afraid of me finding out about his affair with Bella. He stopped speaking and instead opened the fruit basket, then casually picked up a mango as if by accident. Seeing that I didn't stop him, he stared straight at me while slowly peeling the mango. If I were still the original Susan, I would have probably jumped out of bed by now, because she once added mango to a dessert she made for Frank, causing him to have an allergic reaction that nearly sent him into shock. So she knew better than anyone that Frank must never touch mango. But what does that have to do with me? I remained silent, shifting my gaze back to the book before me. Thinking it would be better if he died from the allergy, perhaps then I could return directly. Before long, the sound of Frank's labored breathing filled the hospital room. I frowned and looked over, only to see him sitting on the sofa, his face pale, lips purple, still staring at me. While pressing the call button, I said impatiently, Mr. Frank, don't you know you're allergic to mangoes? Susan, he called softly. I pretended not to hear, not even getting out of bed. The doctor arrived quickly. When the ward finally fell completely silent, I rolled my eyes at the door and couldn't help but mutter, idiot. Compared to my calmness, the neighboring ward was much more chaotic. I heard Bella was insisting on getting out of bed and almost tore open her wound. I had a dazed sense of role reversal. Was I the villainess, and were they the true love? But Bella's next move told me I was overthinking it. Though spoiled and pampered, Bella had a stronger constitution than I did. While I was still hospitalized, she had already been discharged. Since she was discharged from the hospital, Frank has visited less frequently, likely staying by her side. I can only hope Bella becomes even more cunning, ensuring my smooth divorce. Frank's absence actually makes it easier for me to handle certain matters, such as contacting lawyers, or taking stock of our shared marital assets. For a high-profile divorce case like mine, plenty of lawyers would be willing to take it. I heard Lawyer Jack and Mr. Frank grew up together. Why would he agree to take my case? The Jack before me is the top-tier lawyer recommended by the firm. We didn't exactly grow up together, but moving in the same circles, I've naturally heard about your situation with Mr. Frank. Jack adjusted his glasses. Compared to Frank's arrogance, Jack exuded more of an elegant nobility befitting a wealthy young master. I just didn't expect that Miss Susan would one day think to hire a lawyer. Indeed, the Susan of old would have simply walked away empty-handed, but I'm different. If I don't tear a chunk of flesh from Frank, I won't be able to vent the hatred that's been festering in my heart for so long because of him. People, after suffering losses, always have to learn and grow. I ignored his veiled sarcasm and straightened my hospital gown. If Miss Susan is uncomfortable, I can recommend another lawyer for you. Jack walked to the bedside, looking down at me from above. I turned my head and met his gaze directly. That won't be necessary. On the contrary, I think Attorney Jack is an excellent choice. After all, if it were someone else, they would likely be intimidated by Mr. Frank's influence, wouldn't they? Jack didn't respond but instead smiled faintly, extending his slender fingers toward me as he said, "Pleasure working with you." On the day of my discharge from the hospital, Frank didn't come, it was his assistant who arrived. He said Frank asked him to pick me up and take me home. Seeing his evasive gaze, I couldn't help but feel amused, growing more curious about Bella's tactics. When we returned to the villa, as expected, no one was in the main hall. Following my memory, I went up to the second floor. Before reaching the bedroom door, faint yet unmistakably intimate sounds could be heard from the slightly ajar room. Bella pushed the door open with a smirk, arms crossed, clearly ready to enjoy the show. Inside, a man and woman were passionately kissing, the large wedding photo hanging above the bed seeming to mock the entire scene. I took out my phone and snapped a picture with a crisp click. The woman on the ottoman was the first to regain her composure, timidly calling me sister. Frank was momentarily at a loss, then frowned and calmly said, "You're back. Why didn't you knock? Do I need to knock to enter my own bedroom?" I replied indifferently. No sooner had the words been spoken than Frank's eyes lit up. "You really were faking amnesia." I rolled my eyes and tilted my chin, gesturing for him to look at the wedding photo by the bedside. In the photo, Susan was smiling sweetly, while Frank beside her looked as grim as if he had just lost his father. Seeing Frank fall silent, I glanced up and down at the woman standing nearby and said with a smile, "And who might this sister be?" "I heard at the hospital that Mr. Frank was devoted to my foster sister Bella, but it seems rumors truly can't be trusted." The petite woman beside me flushed red and explained, "Sister, you've misunderstood. I'm Bella." I'm not sure if the misunderstanding she's referring to is me mistaking her for someone else, or her being intimate with her own brother-in-law. Without arguing, I nodded and said, "I see, my apologies then. We never met at the hospital, so I didn't recognize you. I didn't mean to skip visiting you." "I'm sorry, sister, I'm so sorry," Bella said with tears in the corners of her eyes, glancing at Frank before suddenly kneeling before me with a thud. She really knows how to go all out. Who would have thought the Smith family could raise such a thing after over 20 years? However, this move might not work on others, but for the arrogant Frank, it's truly hitting the mark. He hurried to help Bella up, then said to me in a deep voice, "Susan, don't go too far." I let out a cold laugh. I lost my child and my kidney, only to come home and see my so-called husband kissing my sister. How terribly far I've gone. This engagement was something you begged for yourself back then. Indeed, the original Susan was like an ostrich, fully aware of the ambiguous relationship between Frank and Bella, yet she still plunged headfirst into it. I saw the timing was right and continued to provoke him. "So what, Frank, as long as I'm around, you two can forget about being together." During my time in the hospital, I finally understood. Frank is the kind of person who won't move unless dragged and resists when pushed. In short, he's just plain stubborn. If the word divorce came out of my mouth, it would probably never happen in this lifetime. Frank sneered while holding Bella. "I thought losing your memory might change you. But it seems old habits die hard. In that case, let's get a divorce." "Frank, no, sister will lose a kidney and might never have children again. How could you divorce her? No one rubs salt in the wound quite like you." Bella, pretending to be provoked, I rushed over and slapped each of them hard across the face. Frank stepped forward to grab me, but I clutched my wound and ducked out of his reach. Then I picked up the decorative items in the bedroom and started throwing them at the two of them. Frank had no choice but to shield Bella as they retreated to the doorway. With a loud bang, I slammed the bedroom door shut, then rummaged through the closet to find the marriage certificate and Susan's various documents before grabbing my suitcase and leaving. "Susan, where do you think you're going?" As I reached the door, Frank grabbed my arm. I was about to speak when Bella, standing nearby, reached out and pulled Frank back. "Frank, sis isn't feeling well and wants to go out for some fresh air. Stop pressing her." Frank ignored her, his dark eyes still locked with mine. Seeing this, Bella quickly pretended her wound was hurting, and Frank immediately let go to support her. I seized the opportunity to leave and got into the taxi waiting at the door. "Bella, you really are my secret weapon. I believe your next performance won't disappoint me." Jack came to find me as I was swaying a glass of red wine. Gazing down at the city from the floor-to-ceiling window of the presidential suite. "This is the life. Miss Susan hasn't fully recovered yet. It would be better not to drink." Jack calmly took the wine glass from my hand, gave it a slight swirl, and took a sip directly. 1982 Chateau Lafleur, MS. Susan has excellent taste. To be honest, the black suit, white shirt, and gold-rimmed glasses, professional yet not overly serious, gave Jack a certain refined yet villainous charm. Planning to switch careers and become a butler, lawyer Jack, he let out a light chuckle. "If the client is Miss Susan, that wouldn't be bad at all. However, before becoming a butler, one might have to be a mage first. Don't you agree, Miss Susan?" The original Susan had been a commoner for over a decade, things that Jack and his ilk took for granted, she probably hadn't even seen before. I couldn't be bothered to beat around the bush with him, perhaps by venting Susan's anger and avenging her. I could return home, there was no need to explain too much to him, so I said, "Whether I'm Susan or not doesn't matter. What matters is that I can help you bring down Frank. The business world is like a battlefield. If I want to take down Frank, plenty of people would be willing to get a piece of the pie. I don't mind giving the James family the biggest slice of the cake." Jack raised an eyebrow and said, "I'm all ears, at the very least. I can walk away with a third of Frank's assets from the divorce. I know this isn't enough to shake his foundation, but what if Frank happens to be hospitalized at this very moment?" I rubbed the scar on my waist through my clothes. "Everything is ready. I just hope the east wind arrives at the perfect moment." That night, I had a dream. In the dream, it seemed like the original Susan was telling me everything about her life. She said she was lost by Mrs. Smith in a shopping mall when she was 5 years old, and later sold to a small mountain village. Fortunately, her adoptive parents were honest people and treated her quite well, but the good times didn't last long. The birth of her younger brother took away what little love her adoptive parents had for her. She began to feel like an invisible presence in that household. At the age of 12, she came home from school and saw her adoptive mother hastily hiding a pot of something. She didn't pay it much attention, as such situations had become commonplace since her brother was born. Little did she know that this very act would end up saving her life. The pot of chicken soup her foster mother had hidden was laced with poisonous mushrooms. In the end, none of the 3 family members could be saved. Later, she was recognized and taken back by Mrs. Smith. She looked at the elegant Bella, then at her own rustic self, and from then on, she fell into an inescapable pit of self-doubt. At the high society banquet, she was further humiliated by Bella's schemes. It was at that moment that Frank happened to pass by and offered a helping hand, and thus began her one-sided love. However, it was precisely because of this that she later discovered the truth of the world. This was not a parallel world at all. After waking up, I suddenly received a call from the Smith family's butler, saying that Mrs. Smith was crying and begging to see me. She was on the verge of an emotional breakdown and wanted me to return immediately. What kind of trick is this again? Could it be a deliberate act of suffering, put on for my benefit because they know I'm divorcing Frank? The moment I stepped through the Smith family's front door, the weeping Mrs. Smith rushed forward and threw her arms around me. "Susan, my dear Susan." I shuddered all over. This seemed to be my mother. So I held Mrs. Smith's shoulders and tentatively called out, "Mom." She cried even harder, glanced at Mr. Susan, and then pulled me upstairs to the bedroom. I think my mother, like me, possesses most of the original host's memories. She told me she had just taken a nap at home, and when she opened her eyes again, everything was different. When the butler mentioned Miss Bella, I was taken aback for a moment. What nonsense about Miss Bella, I clearly only have you as my daughter. My mother tenderly stroked my face with concern. I wonder who exactly created this world. The parents of the Smith family are all quite twisted in character, completely different from my own mom and dad. Mom, listen to me, this isn't some parallel world. It's a novel. This was the truth revealed to me in a dream by the original Susan, because the always irrational and biased Smith family parents actually arranged their engagement simply due to her obsession with Frank. And Frank, who was entangled in ambiguities with Bella, seemed to have lost his ability to speak, saying nothing at all. The original Susan noticed something was off, but her love-struck brain chose to turn a blind eye. It wasn't until later, when Bella was hospitalized in critical condition, that Frank forcibly took her for a compatibility test. Sensing danger, she tried to flee, yet her body refused to obey no matter what. Every word she spoke and every action she took were completely beyond her control. Trapped within her own body, her soul wailed with relentless grief day after day, ultimately pulling me in from the real world. What does it matter if it's a fictional world? Those damned bastards actually treated my daughter like this. I'll make sure they die horribly. My mother spat out venomously. Just then, a sudden knock echoed at the door. Mom, it's Bella, I'd like to come in and see you. My mother wiped her tears. Assuming a combative stance, Bella, accustomed to being spoiled, didn't wait for my mother's response and pushed the door open to enter. My mother sternly scolded. Who said you could come in? Do you even understand manners? Is an elder's room a place you can just barge into? The voice was so stern it made me shiver all over. My mother stared fixedly at Bella. Bella's eyes instantly welled up with tears. Mom, I'm sorry. I heard you were crying because of my sister, so I wanted to come and see. Bella, is this how our Smith family has raised you for over a decade? I don't expect you to become a refined lady, but at least don't bring those vulgar tricks from outside to disgust us at home. This time, Bella was truly crying, but she still didn't dare to leave, sobbing as my mother lectured her for another half hour. I watched with great interest from the sidelines. Being scolded by my mom was nothing compared to the humiliation she felt when I saw her in such a pitiful state. All right, go back now. Crying non-stop just from a few words. Our Yen would never act like this. Bella ran away in tears. Mom, you're acting like the big villain here, I teased. My mom rolled her eyes at me. After Bella left, I told my mom about my revenge plan. Not only did my mom fully support it, but she also suggested using the Smith family as bait to maximize the damage to Frank. She said that as relatives, the Smith family not only failed to protect their own daughter but even acted as accomplices. So they didn't deserve to continue living a privileged life. Because I didn't want to share a room with Bella, I ended up returning to the hotel. The east wind that would push the entire plan forward, I believe, will soon be blown into Bella's ears by my mother. As expected, after staying at the hotel for half a month, that bastard Frank came looking for me. He started pestering me to go back home, while feeling disgusted inside. I still had to pretend to be amnesiac and sulky to make Frank lower his guard. So he began recounting how much the original Susan had loved him and all the things she had done for him. I sneered inwardly. So he knew perfectly well. Frank kept pleading for me not to leave him, yet never once mentioned that he loved me. So I provoked him. What about Bella? I saw you two kissing the other day. Frank frowned, remained silent for a long moment, then slowly said, as long as you're willing to come back with me, I'll never meet her alone again. I laughed, a bright and radiant laugh, while mentally calculating how to make sure Bella heard this. But what I said was, Mr. Frank, I've lost my memory. If you want me to willingly become Mrs. Frank again, shouldn't you show some sincerity? Seeing me relent, Frank's expression relaxed considerably. The next day, he showed up at my doorstep holding a bouquet of lilies. It seemed like his first time doing such a thing. As he appeared somewhat awkward, I glanced at the flowers but didn't take them, my expression darkening instantly. I'm allergic to pollen. Didn't Mr. Frank know that? Frank quickly threw the flowers away and said stiffly, sorry, of course, I was lying to him. Just 2 days ago, I received a bouquet of champagne roses from Jack. Jack said this is a gift for business partners. Frank's so-called pursuit didn't last more than a few days before Bella couldn't sit still anymore. She called Frank and said she had been feeling down these past few days, and while hiking, she accidentally sprained her ankle. She didn't dare tell her parents in the Smith family for fear of worrying them. Bella sobbed on the phone, even reproaching herself for demanding Susan's kidney and for her lingering attachment to Frank. In the end, she blessed Frank as if leaving her last words. After all these years as childhood sweethearts, that bastard Frank couldn't sit still anymore. He told me he'd be back soon, but who knew that soon would turn into a month. My mom called to tell me that Bella hasn't returned to the Smith family for several days. When the butler called her, she just hemmed and hawed, saying she was staying at a friend's place for a while. I thought to myself, it's finally done. So I contacted Jack and told him the time was ripe. Once my divorce with Frank was finalized, we could close the net. A few days later, Bella came to the hotel to see me. I chuckled to myself. The east wind had arrived. Won't you invite me in, sister? She appeared gentle and harmless. I stepped aside expressionlessly to let her in. Bella first pretended to care about my health, then proudly flaunted her pregnancy by sticking out her belly. You still don't know, do you, sister? Frank has already agreed to divorce you and marry me. I really have to thank you for the kidney, sister, otherwise, I wouldn't have been blessed with this child. Sometimes I feel guilty. I'm pregnant with Frank's child, while my sister had to have an abortion. I stared at Bella's face without saying a word. She truly embodied the malicious female supporting character to the fullest. Bella, are you saying all this just to provoke me? Bella said. Bella's words came to an abrupt halt, and a look of panic flashed across her face. I continued, Bella, you're not stupid. You should know that smart women deal with men, while foolish ones keep causing trouble for other women. Haven't you always done well before? If this child is destined not to be born, you should know how to maximize its benefits, rather than trying to frame me. After a long silence, Bella spoke up. Sister, you won't tell Frank, right? Of course. After all, I hate him. As I spoke, I gently touched the wound at my waist. Bella stood up and walked toward the door, pausing to look back at me before leaving. Susan, only now do I truly believe you've lost your memory. I smiled nonchalantly. She couldn't possibly be naive enough to think I'd let her off, could she? When Frank came to divorce me with a lawyer in tow, I almost couldn't hold back my laughter. With a single phone call, I summoned Jack. Frank's face darkened as he looked at me. You never thought about starting over with me, did you? I stood up and walked over to Frank, leaning close to his ear and whispering, Frank, I wonder if Bella also has a pink centipede coiled around her waist like I do. Frank and Bella are truly a match made in heaven. They always make the victims forget those hurts. After speaking, I looked at Frank and actually caught a fleeting glimpse of pain on his face, feeling the pain already. You're still living in luxury with a beautiful concubine by your side. You won't know what true pain is until you've lost everything. Frank signed the divorce agreement without hesitation. I suspect that apart from a slight sense of guilt and that tiny bit of self-righteous love, what motivated him more was the belief that these losses could be recouped from the Smith family. This 1/3 of the family assets was merely shifting from the left hand to the right. Unfortunately, he could never have imagined that it was my mother, along with the entire Smith family, setting a trap for him. The day Bella had her miscarriage, I was curled up on the sofa watching TV with my mom, eating from a fruit platter. The butler answered the phone and rushed over in a panic. Madam, it's terrible. Miss Bella was pushed by the young master and had a miscarriage. The butler said this while cautiously glancing at me. He couldn't understand how, overnight, my position and Bella's had completely reversed. Upon hearing the news, my mother didn't even look up. She leisurely took a bite of fruit and said, It's just a miscarriage, not death. Why are you making such a fuss? The butler reluctantly agreed. I couldn't help but touch the scars on my body, thinking my wounds were hurting again. My mom anxiously said, Sweetie, does it hurt? Come upstairs, let me apply some medicine for you. I shook my head and leaned against my mom, thinking that all of this was finally coming to an end. Bella's child was destined not to survive. She forced herself to get pregnant by taking ovulation shots less than half a year after her kidney transplant. Such behavior was nothing short of suicidal. Since the show wasn't over yet, my mother went to see Bella the very next day, pretending to be deeply concerned and bringing her a lot of nutritional supplements. I couldn't show up myself, so I helped by recommending a few housekeeping companies to Frank's assistant. As expected, Frank chose a nanny from one of those companies to take care of Bella. Watching my mother deliver those supplements to Bella day after day, I slowly smiled. In less than half a month, Bella was rushed into the operating room due to kidney failure from the transplant. She had no choice but to stay in the hospital for dialysis while waiting for a new kidney donor, having lost her child and now suffering from kidney failure. Her current misery was no less than Susan's back then, that day. Just as Jack and I finished dinner and left the restaurant, we ran into Frank. He watched me walking with Jack, his face suddenly darkening. "Susan, can't you live without a man?" As soon as he finished speaking, he tried to step forward and grab me, but Jack immediately shielded me behind him. "Since you're already divorced, Mr. Frank, you shouldn't overstep your boundaries, Jack. Don't you understand the principle of, don't flirt with a friend's wife?" Frank said angrily. I rolled my eyes speechlessly. We had just talked about divorce, and yet he was acting like he had no brain stem. Jack brushed off the part of his shirt that Frank had touched and said, "Friends, we're just in the same social circle. At most, we're acquaintances. I wouldn't dare call someone like Mr. Frank a friend." When it came to eloquence, 10 francs wouldn't be a match for Jack the lawyer. But what was the point of arguing here? I stepped forward and hooked my arm through Jack's, saying, "Jack, let's go home quickly. I'm so cold." Jack also cooperatively held my hand. "Go home? You're already living together." Frank's eyes were bloodshot as he spoke, about to rush forward and grab Jack by the collar. Jack threw a left hook, knocking Frank to the ground with a heavy blow. After getting in the car, Jack asked, "Back to my place?" I leaned against the car door, raising an eyebrow at him without saying a word. Jack smiled knowingly. Halfway through the drive, I indeed spotted Frank following behind in my rearview mirror. Jack glanced at me and said, "Since Ms. Susan has already cut ties with the past, why put on this act?" This is what Frank owes Susan. He had been intimate with Bella in front of the original Susan more than once. Now, it's his turn to experience the same pain. Jack and I deliberately chose a bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows, watched 2 movies, and didn't turn off the lights until midnight. Frank's car stayed parked outside Jack's villa all night. When I came out in the morning, he was standing by his car, staring at the front door, with a pile of cigarette butts at his feet. "Serves you right, Susan, we need to talk." He stepped forward to block my path. I took a step back. "Mr. Frank, if I remember correctly, you are currently a married man, and your wife is still in the hospital." Bella and I didn't get a marriage certificate," he said softly, his tone filled with confusion. Next, he poured out his feelings to me. "Ever since being with Bella, it's me who's always on his mind, that he's only taking responsibility for the child in Bella's womb, that he still can't bring himself to marry Bella. What laughable nonsense." Finally, he said, "I know you're upset about my past with Bella and that you're deliberately provoking me with Jack. I can let it go, Susan. Let's call it even, okay?" Hearing this, I couldn't help but laugh a few times, then lifted my clothes and said to Frank, "Mr. Frank, take a look at this scar on my waist. If you want to settle the score with me, shouldn't you at least donate a kidney to my boyfriend first?" Frank's lips trembled as he remained silent, reaching out to touch the scar on my body. Disgusted, I dodged his hand and said seriously, "I was just joking earlier, don't take it to heart, but after all, Bella is my sister and your childhood sweetheart. It pains me to see her waiting in the hospital without a kidney donor. How about it, Mr. Frank, why don't you come with me to the hospital for a compatibility test?" Frank kept talking about loving this and that, but from start to finish, he never truly gave anything to anyone. "Will you come back to me if I donate my kidney to Bella?" I didn't answer directly, instead saying, "After all, Mr. Frank, you are also responsible for Bella's miscarriage and hospitalization." So Frank naively believed that once he repaid his debt, we could start over. But nothing in this world comes that easily. In the world of fiction, I finally got to play the role of an outlaw for once. No sooner had Frank entered the operating room than problems arose with his project with the Smith family. This led to a simultaneous breakdown in the cash flow of both companies. Neither could save the other, and at this critical moment, all the key employees of Frank's company were poached by other firms with high salaries. The James family seized the opportunity to collaborate with other companies and aggressively captured market share. Frank only learned the true state of the company a week later. By then, I was standing by Bella's hospital bed, seeing her off on her final journey. She glared at me with hatred in her eyes. It's you, of course it's me. If she, Bella, could bribe Frank's assistant, then I could also let the assistant earn some extra money. As for the pregnancy, my mother merely dropped a few suggestive hints. She was the one who got the idea herself. Who can she blame? Seeing that Bella was clearly at her limit, I bent down and whispered to her, "You and Frank lured Susan with the bait of love. I was merely following your example. Farewell, Bella." Bella, her face twisted in rage, reached out to grab me. I sidestepped and waited a while longer before pressing the call button by the bed. After Bella was gone, my mother, as her family member, donated her corneas, a final good deed on her behalf. I wonder if the original Susan would be satisfied with Bella's ending. Later, I had the scars on my body tattooed into the shape of phoenix feathers. I hope that when the original Susan returns, she can truly rise from the ashes like a phoenix. Then I told my mother to wait for me at home peacefully. I have a premonition that as long as I witness Frank's miserable state with my own eyes, I can return to the real world. As I was leaving, I happened to run into Jack coming to see me. "Where are you going, Miss Susan? Why not take a ride with me?" I readily took the passenger seat. "Go see Frank." Jack paused in his actions. "Are you leaving? He's really smart and perceptive. If this were my world, I wouldn't mind starting a relationship with him. Unfortunately, I'm a soul traveler. I can't just do whatever I want with someone else's body, even if she is also Susan." Probably, when we arrived at Frank's company building, Jack insisted on accompanying me upstairs. I didn't object, thinking it would be good to have him with me. Just in case Frank went crazy, he could protect me. The way to Frank's office was, one might say, completely unobstructed. The empty workstations and scattered documents undoubtedly declared that this company was on its last legs. The door to Frank's office was left open. When I reached the doorway, he was sitting in his leather chair, eating instant noodles while flipping through documents, a far cry from the proud, domineering CEO I had first met. One defeat, and he'll never be able to turn his life around again. He used his capital to force Susan to donate a kidney, leaving her with nowhere to turn for help. Now, I'll use capital to make him taste the despair of being shrouded in shadow for the rest of his life. With a smile on my lips, Bella knocked on the office door. Frank turned his head at the sound and, upon seeing it was me, charged over like an enraged bull. "Susan, Susan, how dare you show your face in front of me?" His hair was disheveled, his pale face covered in stubble, and he gritted his teeth as he shouted my name. In that instant, I felt an overwhelming sense of satisfaction. This exhilaration belonged to the original Susan. "She's back." In my ears was Susan's voice, shifting from declarations of love to scathing denunciations of Frank, culminating in the crisp sound of a slap. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in my own room. I instinctively reached to touch my waist. The smooth skin bore not a single scar. I drew back the curtains, bathing my entire body in sunlight. I embraced my mother as she rushed into my room, feeling the joy of being reborn. Extra story. After resting at home for a week, I finally returned to the company to resume work. Life gradually returned to its normal rhythm. As for that absurd novel, I eventually tracked down the author. It turned out to be a junior assistant in my company. While termination wasn't necessary, deducting the year-end bonus was absolutely justified. That day, as I was reviewing the report submitted by my subordinates, the HR manager suddenly knocked and entered. Behind her followed a person in a black suit and white shirt. "President Susan, this is our newly hired legal counsel, Attorney Jack." "Attorney Jack, this is our President Susan." I rose with a smile, slowly extending my hand. "Hello, Attorney Jack, I'm Susan." He also smiled and shook my hand. "Hello, President Susan, I look forward to our pleasant cooperation." After hearing the story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.